Hello, and welcome to the Media Center's Local Hero Awards series, in which we showcase 6 people from the Mid-Peninsula for outstanding achievement or contributions to the community. We solicited nominations and were especially looking for the unsung heroes. Each winner is an inspiration, and each has a great story to tell. Sheri Sobrato went through Stanford on the fast track and plunged into a high-end career in investment banking, then onto a Silicon Valley startup. But at the age of 24, everything changed. She's now the founder of the Digging Deep Project, a nonprofit designed to help young patients, ages 13 and older, learn to live with serious medical conditions. It all began with a book, a guided journal, that helped them work through the emotional and psychological challenges of their conditions. 3 years later, this morphed into a video game, Shadow's Edge. It's the first mobile app designed for young people to tap into their own healing power through the process of personal narrative. Sheri, tell me what happened to you when you were 24.
At age 24, I was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, and one that nobody had lived more than 6 months.
What was your reaction, and what process did that start you on?
Well, the first thing I thought is, I've got to get through this. So I made a decision to become the power coper, to work hard and do everything I could as a patient to help myself, along with some incredibly talented and brilliant doctors who are helping me as well.
So it sounds like you went into that the way you kind of had gone into everything, which is full blast ahead. How did that work?
It worked great at first. You know, I was a little bit too old to be getting stuffed animals for my friends. So one thing that everybody who came to visit me in the hospital did was bring me a self-help book. So I read them and highlighted them and took notes and started making new decisions in my life. Do. You know, I was going to get better, and I had a strategy to do that, which was a way I had solved many problems in my life before.
So remind me, you were given how long to live?
Well, I wouldn't say given. They were polite in saying, well, no one's survived beyond 6 months.
Wow.
And one of my doctors, who wanted to encourage me, said, well, maybe it's time somebody did. And that's what I decided to believe.
Wow. Wait, did what? Somebody did what?
He said, he told me it's about time somebody survived, lived longer than 6 months. And that's what I did.
So you had embarked on your go get 'em, get well strategy. How did that work?
So it worked pretty well. I went to a patient empowerment program. I thought I was doing everything right. I honestly didn't really even shed a tear.
Wow.
Except the day before I started chemo, because I had this positive attitude. And I'm not saying that that wasn't helpful at the time. It was extremely helpful to get through, say, the first almost 5 years, because that's when recurrences happen with brain tumors. Mm-hmm. And it was very effective. And I coped very well. But I think what happened was, when I had an unrelated medical crisis that came up, a lot of the feelings that I had stuffed, that, to be honest, I wasn't even aware that I was stuffing these feelings. I didn't think I really felt anything. Everyone admired me for my great and perfect positive attitude and what a powerful, empowered patient I was. So I didn't really give it a thought, but those feelings didn't go away. They were deep inside of me somewhere. And when an unrelated medical crisis came up and I was a patient again, a lot of those feelings that I had never acknowledged came bubbling up to the surface.
So things changed. Tell me about that.
So when things changed, fortunately, I was in graduate school for counseling psychology, and they mentioned during the course of regular coursework that what happens with feelings that are left unacknowledged or unexpressed is they can come out even in a bigger way than they might have otherwise come out if they had been dealt with at the time. And it's kind of like, I remember hearing in school that the analogy of somebody pushing a ball underwater and trying to hold it, and you're like holding and holding, and then all of a sudden, you know, it comes up and bursts up higher than it would have come before. And I felt that was happening to me. And I also remember my teachers in graduate school saying, well, when people start to process their feeling, they might feel like they're falling apart in a way, but they don't. They just start processing it little by little, as much as they're willing to do at the time.
Now, tell me about that phrase, processing.
Okay, so that's a very good question. So processing just means acknowledging and expressing feelings. So for me, it wasn't an intellectual exercise anymore. It wasn't about making decisions to move forward in this direction or this direction. It was about being angry that so much of my life had been taken away at right when I was independent, starting my own company, living 3,000 miles away from my family home, not getting married, not having children, you know, all those things that I was diverted from, let's just say, eventually getting back to many years later, but I was diverted for a while. So there was an anger. And then once the anger started bubbling up, then there was overwhelming sadness, because I had never acknowledged the loss side of things, never acknowledged being different than the other people. So that's, when I say process feelings, they needed to be experienced, and I needed to cry.
Now, you make a distinction between emotional processing and thinking. A lot of what you're describing could be thinking and talking, but that's apparently different from actual emotional processing.
Exactly. So I think naturally I'm a thinker type. Like when I have a challenge in front of me, I make decisions, I set a course, and I do it. That wasn't working for me in this situation. It got me through my crisis, it helped me cope, but I hadn't healed. There was a part of me that just needed to feel. And some people are the opposite. Sometimes they cope by their feelings, and they can feel through everything just fine, but at some point they're so stuck in their feelings that they needed to make a decision and just do something. So people just have to do the opposite, maybe, as part of their healing process of what they did.
Well, you are now in the process of helping others go through this.
Exactly.
What's the key? What unlocks that? What unlocked for you that step to go from the thinking, doing? How do you start?
Well,
feeling?
I don't. So here's the thing: there's no magic time. I think it almost happens to you, because for me, it was an unrelated medical crisis that caused it to come up, and for other people, it could be something that taps into that same set of feelings that haven't been experienced that do it. So that's what happens if you don't go through it in a way that sort of, that's what happens in real life. And it can be kind of dangerous and can freak you out when all of a sudden you start having all these feelings. The other way to do it, which is the way I help people to do it, is to begin to both have a platform or a way of expressing these feelings that might not be the most natural way. It's not necessary, because people aren't always talking. Like if you have somebody that you can talk to and express your feelings, that's one great way to do it. But not everybody has somebody that they can have that sort of authentic relationship with, that can just sit there and watch them cry. It's hard. And sometimes we get in these patterns with people where we can't do it in the normal, natural way. That's really ultimately the best way. So the next best way, I think, is to have a safe place where you feel you can do that bit by bit when you're ready. And some people do journal writing, for example. Other people write songs. Other people express themselves through art. But it's different sort of things that are less threatening maybe than a one-on-one conversation, to help you put words to those feelings that you're having and to help you move forward and incorporate those into your story of who you are.
So that's when you came up with the idea of a journal, I take it.
Yes, I had a friend Rose Offner, who had other journal writing tools to help people move through difficult situations in their lives, but not for kids with physical and chronic illnesses, which is my love. So we teamed up and we came up with a journal called the Digging Deep Journal, and was given to hospitals all over the country. And it was a way for patients to work either with a professional at the hospital, with their parents, or older teens and even kids over 12 could work through this book that was beautiful. It was a place to capture those stories. I mean, these kids have incredible stories of courage and hope.
So do you see kids who are, let's say, suppressed or pushing down that balloon and open the journal and start transforming or opening up?
So what's interesting is that the journal was a large format book with full colored pages, and the kids would write right on it. So what typically I see people do is flip through the pages. Sometimes they find a piece of art that they want to explore and write on top of, and sometimes and it causes them to read the question. Sometimes they just look at the question and they're like, oh yeah, that's me, I want to start here. So the journal was a way to just kind of flip through it and to find a place where they are. It wasn't like you had to start at page 1 and work through page 140. It was a little bit at a time and as you want. And they're not even aware, like they may not even know what they're going to write about, but what would happen is they'd start writing, and as they start writing, they start noticing stuff, and then they keep going, and by the end they notice, they feel like they're in a different place than where they started. And yes, sometimes tears come, but what I've discovered is they're incredibly proud of their stories, and they immediately want to read it to somebody and say, look, this is what I want to share.
And these are the stories of their illnesses?
Yes and no. I mean, the book was not filled with just questions about your illness and how about this aspect of your illness and how about this aspect. I mean, who would do it? So the book is about them. It's about the stories of their life. It's about what they celebrate in themselves, how they find courage, what tricks do they have up their sleeve, who's helping them, who surrounds them, what are their dreams and hopes. So it wasn't just about their illness now.
So I want to ask you a question about these kids, or you, or both. How are you and they different after going through this process that you went through?
So I can only I'll tell you from what kids have told me. They're like, wow, nobody's ever asked me this. And they're empowered by knowing that they have the answers inside.
What's an example of what they are being asked that empowers them?
Oh, it might be like, what are your talents and strengths and what make you shine, for example. And maybe they hadn't really thought about that a lot because maybe they look different. Maybe they feel awkward. Maybe they're not the sports person that they used to be before. But that makes them think like, wait a minute, what are my talents? Well, gee, I like to, who knows? I like to cook. I like to do art. I like to be funny. And then they realize, hey, maybe being funny, that could be a coping mechanism of mine.
I see. Yeah.
So that's how it works.
What were your own surprises in going through this process?
So I think my first big surprise was that I had all the feelings to be in the first place. I'm like, where did they come from? Because I was completely unaware that I had stuffed them or that there was any sadness there or anything that needed to be worked through. And by that, I didn't do anything conscious to work through them as much as just allow it to happen. And then the other thing that surprised me was that how long it took, how delayed it was and how long it took. I mean, I didn't start feeling for like 5 years, a couple years. It took a couple years to go from the beginning. Then one day it was just stopped. I was done. I had processed them and it was like magic. I'm like, oh. And I just trusted the process because thank God I had been to graduate school, and you can learn this from self-help books or going to a therapist or whatever, but I knew I wasn't going to fall apart, that at some point it would just end. And it did. It's like someone going through grief. One day it's not like the whole situation is over. It's just somehow it becomes part of your everyday life and your everyday story, and you don't have to hide it anymore. And
are you a different person?
So I think I did two things. Part of it was I made decisions to be a different person. But the rest of it was things that happened to me. For example, by realizing that it was okay to share with other people what I was thinking and feeling in a real sort of way, and getting people's reaction, like big hugs, like, I've been wanting to tell you for so long. Me too. And then we both start crying together, in that warmth and that closeness and that incredible richness in my life that I have from being authentic and real with people. It's not, I don't know if I would have gotten there. It's certainly not at 24. I don't think I would have gotten there if I hadn't been sick.
So you began with journaling and made a leap, a step into a mobile app. Where did that come from, and how is it related to the journaling?
Okay, so In fact, a lot of the process is the same. The process of self-expression, self-discovery, expression, and moving through challenge in a positive way is exactly the same in the book and the game. The game came about, the game Shadow's Edge came about because the journal was too successful, I gotta say. I mean, it was a big fat book, heavy, sending it all over the country. And at some point, we needed to go digital. And I didn't want to go digital just because it was expensive to keep finishing the book. I wanted to go because it was a better product. And so what I wanted, I knew therapists, parents loved the book and were giving it to their children. But who I wasn't absolutely convinced loved it were the kids themselves. And they loved the questions and they loved the stories that were coming out of the questions. But I thought this could be a more creative, fun, and interactive process for kids. And I hired some people that were gamers, and they said, don't make a journal, don't make a digital journal. You make a journal in the game, but make it a game. Make it a game with characters and world and story.
So just in a nutshell, what is this game? It's not, oh, you have a scary sickness, how do you come out the other end? It's not that literal, I take it.
Well, fortunately, I worked with Rosie Lockhorse, who's a game producer, and she said, let's do a game. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding. I know nothing about technology. You mean like Pong, which was the only game I had ever played? She goes, no, modern games are like stories. They're like movies, but then you learn things as you interact with it. You can go any direction you want to go. And it makes content a lot more accessible and fun, particularly when it's difficult content. When kids are going through a difficult period, you might as well make it fun and colorful and lively and have characters. And so Shadow's Edge, the game, what happens is these kids are thrown into a world that's been decimated by storm. And that's the metaphor, much like they are going through a storm. And they get to rebuild it through the power of their self-expression, which is graffiti and writing.
And can that really help? Can kids make that leap from the metaphor to their own lives?
So I certainly hope so. The skills that they learn in the game, there's both wisdoms buried within the game, which is the psychoeducational content, and then the process of putting words to feelings and expressing yourself is a learned skill. And it's my hope that by doing so in a game, that they'll be able to do that in the real life too.
How do you measure the success of what you've done so far?
Well, there's the kind of boring back-end way, which is, how many players do we have? How many minutes do they spend on each page? Do they move through the game? Do they keep coming back? So, of course, we look at those analytical measures, but I measure it a lot by what kids are telling me, by the quotes that I'm receiving, by the stories that I'm hearing them say, by the artwork that they're producing in the game, and I can see that healing. But we're also doing research on resilience, academic research through Northwestern University, and looking at how it changes and builds those resilience factors.
Tell me just a couple of knock your socks off memories that you have of feedback from kids.
I had one kid tell me, I've come to tears playing this. I've had other kids like, I'm learning things about myself I never knew before. Thank you. I mean, it's those kind of quotes that I think keep me going. But, I want to become a digital therapeutic. I want people to recognize the power of a game to teach, to deliver mental health and self-help content to youth, because it's how they live and learn. So that's why we're doing, in addition to all the stories and the quotes that the kids are giving me, I also want to show that it's actually making a difference in terms of building up their resilience, which is things like optimism and self-esteem and positive self-identity and regulating their emotions.
Do you see larger applications? I can imagine this having a lot of benefit to people who aren't necessarily facing serious illness, just kids in general.
So it can be teens in general, just dealing with their life. It could be other kinds of trauma that there's a possibility of getting growth on the other side from any type of trauma you experience. And anything, whether you're a foster youth or you're someone who's lost their parents or brother or sister, for example, or someone who's dealing with a crazy set of circumstances because either you yourself are addicted or your parents are to substance. There's many applications, or just exploring gender identity issues or understanding bullying or all those things that regular kids have to go through. It's about learning the process of moving through challenge.
When you look at your life now and your life when you were an undergraduate or in banking or whatever, my guess is it's not what you expected it to be. What do you get most? What's the most fulfilling part about what your life has become?
Well, other people have asked me, what did my cancer bring me, for example? And I have to say freedom. I enjoyed my life. I was doing what everybody else wanted me to do, though. And although I was on a path, and certainly a path to success, it wasn't the core of who I really was. I had always volunteered with kids in hospitals, and that's what I loved. And after being sick, it gave me the permission to say, it's okay to just do that. And in fact, now that you've had, more significant health challenges than you did as a kid, you're in a different place and you can even help in a different way than I would have. And giving myself the freedom and permission to do that was a huge step in my life.
Wow. What have you learned from these kids about yourself or about larger things?
So I have to say, it's the kids who wrote the book and the game. It was because it's all based on their lived experience. It's based on, we used to play this game in support groups where they got to be on TV. And I was the one asking the questions, and they got to answer it. And we'd have like this little fake TV audience. And they brought up a lot of the questions. They put all the questions in a hat that they wanted me to ask. And you know what? Those are the questions in modified form, that we've used in the book. I mean, it's not just what people think of with sick kids when you see them on TV or in a movie, like, oh my God, how are they getting through this? They're so strong. And I think the one thing that sick kids have taught me is strength doesn't mean just being up all the time, or it doesn't mean just putting up with this pinch or this prick of a needle. It means being real and facing the world with perseverance.
Any advice for parents?
So for parents, I'd say it's time that we get real with our kids. And it's hard to watch kids with difficult emotions, experiencing difficult emotions. And it's also hard for kids to watch their parents cry. But I think some of the closest times that can happen is when you just allow those tears to come. And I think that parents are especially good at taking care of their kids, right? But sometimes that means giving them the space to work things out on their own and to let their kids lead them sometimes.
Great advice. We're out of time, so thank you very much. Congratulations on your award, and best of luck with the book and the game.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Do you know someone who has overcome significant hardship and has an inspiring story to tell? Someone who has sacrificed or given over and above to the community and deserves some recognition? If so, please contact us with your nomination for next year's Local Hero Awards. To find out more about our local heroes and to watch interviews with all the winners, visit our website, midpenmedia.org. At the Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, you can make your own videos and television programs and take classes in all aspects of media production. You can also hire our professional services team. To find out more about that, go to mcproservices.com. Congratulations to all our winners, and thank you for watching.